Hello there, welcome to a second thoughts overview of Tiktaq'To of the Lizardmen. So I played through the initial turns, checked the victory conditions, starting location, buildings, etc. So I have a grasp of how the faction plays out. Now these are my conclusions, and in the end I'll show you some army compositions that I would like to try out. Always a disclaimer, this is not an in-depth guide, but will have elements of it. Basically what I would do before starting up a campaign and how I would end up, continuing and having victory with that campaign. It should help you out to enjoy the faction. So, without further ado, let's go play with Tiktaq'To of the Lizardmen. For our short victory condition, we need to secure the western jungles and the central jungle, so pretty much the two starting provinces that you have, one starting province and another neighboring one. And you also need to destroy the following factions, the Oracles of Tzeentch. So you gotta go against Kairos, which is a problem in itself, but still it's doable, especially in the early game. If you rush him, then it's much better. So, and of course you also have to occupy, loot, raise, or sack 30 different settlements. So it's pretty much a very short campaign, really. It kind of streams you line to go, into the south, dominating the area, conquering all the settlements, so having those 30 settlements, and of course defeating Kairos in the meanwhile. If you achieve this hero capacity +3 for all heroes, this is great to ensure that you don't need too many buildings. It's particularly useful for heroes like the Skink Oracle, which is a tier 4 hero, and it's very useful. So yeah, especially for the Lizardmen, because they have so many buildings, and often you're struggling to get all the buildings that you need and having to decide which ones. It's actually very helpful that you can get a couple of heroes. So for all the factions that have +3 to hero capacity, I think the Lizardmen definitely really get the best deal out of this this reward. Now, in terms of the long campaign, it's pretty much the same for every Lizardman. So, achieve the short victory, occupy, loot, raise, or sack 70 different settlements, so basically double, honestly. And then to control all provinces of Lustria. Lustria is located, for those that you do not know, if you're weak in geography in terms of the Warhammer world, it's this region here. Okay, so basically you have to dominate that. A quick typical expansion would be, I'll speak over there, but typical expansion would be to dominate these southlands and maybe use these chaos to spring, an invasion of Lustria, and then you dominate it. That's about it. But still, it's going to take a while. It's going to be quite a standard long campaign, I would say, and you're going to be conquering regions that are kind of natural to you. So that's basically it. Now, if you succeed, you have a +10 hero recruit rank. It's particularly useful, of course, for those caster heroes, but also to get better mounts quickly. For instance, for your heroes, which is really cool because, especially for your heroes, it actually plays out really well into the playthrough. You get the dinos, which is always good. Now, Tiktaq'To, he's the master of the skies. So what he gets is a specific right of Zunki, which increases campaign movement range of all armies and characters when performed. This is very cool. It's just a small mechanic, but sometimes it can make the difference between, losing or winning, really. Skink heroes do start with a Pterodon mount, which is really great. You have more campaign line of sight. This is kind of overlooked, but of course it's very helpful, especially when you're scouting with a hero, It's always one of those things that you don't notice until you're missing it out, If you would have a mod that would put campaign line of sight to reduce like 50% or something, you'll definitely notice how different it is. And then Pterodons, all Pterodons gain a unique battle ability, which is really great. It plays into the faction of, Death from the Skies, which is they can drop rocks, and those do quite significant damage. They also do a flammable contact, so they become weak to fire damage, which is why this faction actually really plays out into trying to give enemies that weakness to fire, and then dishing out some damage with fire units, such as salamanders, for instance. So that's a very niche idea that you may use. Always remember that you have these rocks, you drop them out, they become flammable, so yeah, that sort of idea. Now, in terms of climate, it's average at best. It's one of the main issues that I find with the Lizardmen in themselves, and the reason why some Lizardmen lords are much better. It's because, yeah, you don't have a lot of suitable. You don't have like a clear region. If mountains were suitable, it would be so much better. It would make the whole difference, okay? Because even in Lustria and even in the Southlands, you still have that unpleasant mountain terrain, And especially in some other places, you don't really have anything other than unpleasant or uninhabitable, which is really poor for you. So yeah, that's a big issue really. So let me just show you. Always remember that what you get is, and particularly what I always note is, forget about construction costs and income. That's really not that impactful really. It is, but still, if you compare with the casualty replenishment rate and the fact that you get attrition there, so that's the hindering part. That's what makes you go slower, much slower on those regions, which is, you know, why you should be wary of that. So yeah. So your starting province is a 3-settlement one. You do start with recruitment for flying units, which is really cool, very thematic, but you don't have any special buildings here. So typical expansion, like I mentioned, will be towards the south, with a weary eye on the north. Be careful who dominates there, you know, who becomes powerful and who doesn't. So depending on which factions you win over there, you may have to decide different paths to victory. Now, the sea also allows opportunities for goodies that you can find at sea, and you should take advantage whenever possible. So perhaps, you know, having one army that just goes around the sea, getting those goodies, getting some more gold for your buildings and everything, and always, you know, being close to shore to support your expansion. That's always a nice idea to have. Diplomatically, you're kind of part of the Order Tide, so you'll be fighting undead, greenskins, monogods, skaven, so for the most part you'll be able to gain favor with those from the Order Tide, you know. Therefore, outposts ideas, I'll go with Bretonia, Empire, or High Elves, you know. Entirely feasible. Try to obtain some good ranged units or cavalry from them, or especially flying entities, you know, some good infantry from the High Elves. You can also pick those up. You know, those are always good options to have. For instance, I even included the artillery here. This is mostly if you're, you know, in the early game, for instance. So some of these units, of course, like the mortars, for instance, you know, this is just early game stuff if you want, and of course then you upgrade it into Dagger Griffs or into other types of artillery. So in terms of mechanics, let's talk about rights. Rights are fairly decent, although some are costly. For instance, Primeval Glory costs 12,000. It does give you an army, well, so yeah. It gives you an army of Feral Carnosaur, Stegodon, and Bastillodon units that will spawn at your faction's capital. Sometimes this may be quite useful, particularly if you gain, you know, some gold from the sea. Maybe you'll want to activate that. Do remember that it costs upkeep, so be wary of that. It's mostly, you know, an army that can give you a very edge in the beginning. And of course it gives the army ability Feral Cold Ones, so that you can summon, which is always nice. Then the Right of Zunki, this is the special one for Tiktaq'to. So basically you get additional campaign movement range for armies and characters during one turn only. Of course this may turn the tide of a specific situation, so remember that you have 20 turns cooldown, so you cannot use it all the time, but especially in the beginning, for instance, this may be quite useful. It's not that costly, so this may be useful for you to, you know, if you defeat an enemy army and then suddenly you don't want them to recover, well, maybe you'll want to go for this. Now, armies, of course, will be unable to change out of march stance once they use up their initial movement range. Be wary of that. Now, you also have Right of Ferocity, giving unit experience gain per turn, income from post-battle loot, recruit rank, and local recruitment capacity. For the most part, you should have this all the time active, if you can, of course. Especially because the final one, the Right of Awakening, is just on cooldown, doesn't cost anything. As soon as you can, you should activate this and keep activating all the time, just so that you can have more Slan Mage Priests. These are lords that you can choose their lore of, if they're Lord of Life or whatever. I can't remember all of them, but I think it's Lord of Life and Light and something else. Basically this is a good way, of course, of obtaining a caster lord. They're very effective and rather inexpensive as well. So then we have Lord Croak. So Lord Croak, a spellcaster, of amazing proportions. He does have, in essence, the Supreme Shield of the Old Ones, very effective damage resistance aura. And then you have the Deliverance of Itzel, 1, 2, and 3. These explosions do not affect friendly troops, and they're huge explosions. He can get a lot of damage done just by himself. A one-man army for himself, for sure. In terms of his skill line, he does have a very effective skill line, especially even towards your campaign. So, you know, more training, more replenishment rate, it can stimulate the growth, it can boost the income. So basically you can always get these, and notice that this guy is still on level 34. So I've already completed everything in terms of the, you know, their typical spells that he would get and everything, and so he can get really powerful for your faction overall. And in addition, of course, always have, you know, amazing winds of magic and all the specific spells that you can get. So yeah, in essence, a very really powerful magic user. So whenever you get the quest for him, just go for it. You'll never regret it. So another mechanic is actually the Blessed Spawnings. I do not have any here, but in essence what you will get is that... Oh, let me see if I have anything here. No. Basically what you have is when you get some missions, okay, you will be rewarded with some blessed units, such as this one, for instance. So basically, if I raise or sack a number of settlements, I'll be rewarded with blessed skink skirmishers, which is always nice. This helps out that these are better versions of the units. So in addition to the typical regiments of renown units that you have also have the Blessed Spawnings, which become available, of course, after specific events. And then we do have the Geomantic Web. What is this? It's basically here, as you can see, that small icon there that you get. So the more that you are able to upgrade this specific building here, which reinforces the Geomantic Web, as you can see there. So the more that you can upgrade this, so if you have this one here, and if you have it in other locations nearby other ones, as you can see with the Geomantic Web here. So if I would have the level 5 building there, level 5 building there, if I conquer this, if I have the level 5 building there, level 5 building there. So basically all the edicts in these provinces, assuming that I have them fully, you know, will be much more powerful. For the difference that, for instance, Geomantic Web strength is 2, so I only get plus 20 growth and income from all buildings 4%, but look at the difference there. Growth plus 40, income from all buildings plus 16%. So getting all those buildings actually works out really well. It's kind of like, I like to call it a soft bonus. You don't really have to do anything other than building that building and ensuring that you get, you know, good connections with the main province. These are all province capitals, by the way. It also shows you where all the province capitals are, because of, you know, you can see it there. So yeah, it's really cool. It still costs you a slot on the capital, which, you know, be careful, be mindful of that, because it's always important, especially, we'll talk later in the buildings, but it's really interesting for the Lizardmen because they have one of the most expensive in terms of number of buildings, you know, building tree lines that you can get. So in terms of edicts, you have the growth and income from all buildings, then you have recruitment cost reduction, more recruit rank, more leadership in the armies in province, and weapon strength. So this is significantly interesting because over the time as I'm playing now, I get a little bit more interested in the defensive ones. So you shouldn't overlook this, especially when you're defending, when the enemy declared war suddenly, and you need to recruit units typically, and you're also getting a little bit more weapon strength, more leadership. So don't neglect this. Always remember that sometimes you do have some extra options when you're defending that you may, you know, be overlooking. That's the idea. Then you also have this kind of defensive as well, which is more control, chance of plague spreading reduced, plague duration reduced as well. Notice plague duration, this is super important. If you're already affected, it also helps. Enemy hero action success chance reduced, minus attrition when under siege, minus corruption. So in essence, if you're under attack by anyone that is bringing some corruption, that is bringing in some plagues, you do have this one. Of course, you may wish it, of course, for the army ability, but for the most part, it's the effects that you wish. Then you have a research rate. Note, so important, so good. I always love when anyone has. Yes! And then you have construction cost reduction, chance of winds of magic increasing in strength when changing. That's a lot, 30% actually, so it's really cool. One thing that you should note is, especially with the geometric strength of 5, it's plus 10 research rate, which is amazing, okay? And all that chance of winds of magic is just crazy. So one of the good ideas to use with the research rate increments is that you should always plan that out so that it actually diminishes anything here. So if I put that now, 4% won't change this, but you should always use it in together with others so that you can do that. And I already talked about the growth and income buildings there. So then we have the army stances. They're fairly typical with some small changes. So astromancy, it costs 25% movement to get, and then you have more chance of intercepting enemies, more ambush defense chance, which is great fighting against Skaven, fighting against Zinch, yes please. Attribute Vanguard deployment for certain units, which is also nice. It doesn't say which ones, I can't remember which ones is, but of course still is there. And then the campaign line of sight, it's also good to detect some other enemies, of course, and lying in ambush. Then we have the channeling, which is more winds of magic at the cost of 10% movement. Oh, you all know that. Then we have the encamp, so enables replenishment and immunity to most attrition. For the most part, you'll need this severely when you're invading any uninhabitable terrain, so never forget you do have it. Of course, it does cost you 50% move. Then I have ambush, 25% move, hidden until discovered. It's basically the one. Never overlook ambushing in the early game. Remember that the main issue with ambushing, or the main idea, is that you're hidden. It's not that you're actually going to ambush. You want to be hidden so that the AI moves into a worse position, and then you have some more tactical options. That's how I typically approach any first enemy that you're going to face. If they already have any powerful enemy, of course, they're already going to have a full stack. Sometimes an ambush is all that you need, and then of course force march. That's basically it. So, in terms of buildings, there's no specific special buildings in your starting province. The only difference that you do have is that, the flying units that you can get, they're, much easier to obtain with level 2 and level 3. It's really cool. You do have, a growth and casualty replenishment building. That's nice, of course. As you can see, I'm using that. But I'll talk about it, why it's sometimes something that you'll destroy later on. I'll speak about it. So, you need 8 buildings for full military, and that includes the armory for some units. I wish really they would withdraw this. It's no longer necessary. To be something that I wish I would give out. If I would give any feedback on Lizardmen, please solve some of the building issues, because they have so many buildings. Look at this, and most of them are really important or have so many good effects. So yeah, now you need 8 buildings, including the army for some units. 4 of them, with including the flying units, of course, can be built in minor settlements, and you should absolutely go for that, of course, because you can build it up to tier 3. Then we have specific buildings, such as, for instance, the Star Chamber, which gives some good recruit rank for Slan and hero recruit rank as well, which is always nice. It does unlock some technologies. Don't forget, you need at least to build once to go for that determining the Great Plan technology. Then we have the Scrying Pool, which not only unlocks some technology as well, but it also gives you research rate plus 5%. So this is also really important. The research, I'll talk about it in just a second. Research is really cool for the Lizardmen, very important. It affects very well. But you need a lot of research actually. So research rate improvement, always nice. And of course, all the other defensive aspects there, for more campaign movement range. It's always good to have at least one in each province if you manage. Now, then we have some infrastructure buildings, so growth and casual replenishment rate, always nice. More income, that's always typical. Then we have a very huge control building, so for the most part 1 per province. If you're in the higher difficulty, should work out. Don't invest too much. The biggest issue with this is that it doesn't give you anything else. I wish it would. The Lizardmen definitely would get an improvement with getting these two together, income and control. It wouldn't really affect their gameplay too much, and it would give you a much better chance. Or the control one could mix with the Geomantic Web. So Geomantic Web, this is the building that you will need in order to reinforce the Geomantic Web. You always need this building in all your capitals. So every single capital that you have, it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not a 7 slot province, for instance. It's always a 6, because you're always going to need it to directly improve the commandments, at least in the current state of the game with how it works. And then in the I want to talk about the small settlements. Just to note that you also have the lodestone, which increases income from all buildings, gives local recruitment capacity as well. So this may be of importance if you're trying to get a province that it's your main military producer. By all means, have at least one of this to help out. Cannot be constructing major settlements. It always gives some income from buildings, and that's always nice, of course. But remember that the biggest issue that I have with the Lizardmen is how many buildings they actually need. Now, let's go to the research. Research is really good, like I mentioned. It gives good campaign and battle buffs throughout. So for instance, like you see here, more speed, more charge bonus, that's always nice. Then you have some ammunition here for Terran rider units. It actually includes the Ripadatus Dell, I don't know why, in case they would have some more speed for those units, like you see there. Then you have more tradable resources, so you have some stuff for construction, for income from trade. And then you have this. So for instance, you would need this building, the scrying pool, to get access to all of these ones. Now, and that's the biggest issue with the research of the Lizardmen, is that you kind of need this one to unlock these, then you need this one to unlock these, but they're always really powerful as well. So always ensure that you're going with the sequences that you need. So for instance, if you're going with Saurus, of course, then you might want to go for here, or you want to go for the where's there? There's there here. To get, you might want to go for the Tablet of the Saurus, there we go, and the sequences for spawning there, and then you go all the way over here until the Temple Guards, or maybe you want to go for the Skinks, so you're going to go here, into the Croxicores, into the Skink units. So that's the sort of idea that you should go for, especially in the early game. Plan it out a little bit, take your time checking how this works, okay, so that you can synergize much better in terms of your army compositions, the research, and of course, the red line for the lords. They really benefit from that synergy. So if you plan it out, I cannot emphasize enough, that will help you out getting better army compositions, or more varied army compositions, which I always like to have. So as always, you have your Lord and Legendary specific skills, the yellow line or the melee line, or sometimes the magic line, of course, for casters. Then you have the red line or army skills, and then you have the blue line or campaign. Now, let's start with the blue line. It does include the lesser upkeep for your army, which is always nice, and the casualty replenishment rate, but it's on the second part, and for the most part it's very difficult when you have specifically for the Lizardmen, when you kind of want to invest a little bit in the melee line, or you want to invest in their abilities as well, so you may not have all the skills to go there in terms of replenishment. So try to get something other than the replenishment if you wish to go for it. It's always nice to have some ambush success, some corruption, but that's the main issues here as well, is that you don't get anything really important in the first line. I would always love to have either upkeep reduction or either replenishment here, or maybe some attrition reduction, especially for the Lizardmen. That would be great, but that's not what we have. Then we have the red line. It has very good choices, rather cheap, but you kind of go into either Saurus units or you go into the Skink units. And the worst part is that you also have one for Temple Guard and Croxicores, which is overall more beneficial to you than the Saurus ones, especially if you don't have anything that really goes into the Saurus. Sorry about that. That goes into the Saurus, because the Temple Guards kind of act as both anti-infantry. They have armor piercing, they have anti-large as well, so you can use them definitely. So that's a big issue. Proud Warrior, if it would have the Temple Guards there, it would be a no-brainer as well. But still, yeah, make your decision. And then, of course, you have one for nearly every single dinosaur, which kind of turns into, oh, well, I guess I'll always take this. And it's very effective as well. So then we have these blessings. Blessings is one thing that you can choose at level 10. And then it has some different choices for you. Of course, for instance, this one for Source Infantry and Temple Guard units upkeep. That's always nice. Maybe you want more speed, especially for your flying units. Or maybe you have, I think it's this, or yeah, you do have this one for casualty replenishment rate. So instead of spending 3 on the other one, you spend 1 here and also get some controlling corruption. Think about it, you know. But for specifically for the Tiktaq'to, of course, you may want to go just with even more reduction in Pterodon riders and Ripidactyls, you know, that sort of idea, and still more leadership. That's always nice. Okay, so it's always one of your ideas here that you can go with the blessings as well. A special note to heroes with your skink chief that actually gives you replenishment. So this is one of the ideas that I definitely use for an army, especially because of how you've seen the Lord skills in the other ones. And under Tiktaq'to they also start mounted, so it's really cool. It's really a nice addition. They are very good, you know, immediately good in combat because of that Pterodon, so it's really cool. And in addition, we do have that magic. Yeah, magic is really important for the Lizardmen. And especially, I already have a Slan Priest Mage here of life, you know, with the 2nd generation, so it's nice. So the idea here is that you have good lords, and all of them have specific ones. I'll show you in just a moment. But the Slan Mages, they are the ones who have different magic lords, which is always very important, so be wary of that. Just remember that you always have that right to recruit some Slan Mages. You can choose their lore, their magic lore, and of course concoct a different army composition with that. So here are the red line skills for the Lizardmen. Now they have quite a lot of mixed units, so you can have different compositions and buff every unit in that composition very easily, actually. So I won't go too much into it. I already addressed it a little bit. So Tiktaq'to, he'll always go into a flying squad. Come on, with Ripidactyls acting as like the frontline infantry and the rest being ranged units. You know, I added in just some Kotos. They're nice to bring with some more spells to the mix, or you may wish to also, for instance, capitalize on the fire weakness that your rocks drop, you know. Then you have some salamanders there to giving even more damage, you know, or even some solar engines there and some healing units. And of course these guys are dinosaurs, so they'll fight really well. So it's up to you. All of these compositions can work out really well. And then of course they're very cheap in terms of red line skills. This is about the minimum that you can have. You know, always remember that you need at least six skill points to get to the second part of the line. So yeah, 10, 11, it's 10 is about the minimum that you can have in terms of red line skills, which is really also very effective. And especially when attacking, always remember that he's much better at attacking, so you know, try to reinforce that as well. In terms of the other typical composition, so Saurus Old Bloods may have the most typical composition that I like to have. So as in they go into Temple Gods, you know, go into some Croxigors, some Chameleon Skinks here, you know, with specifically, I didn't make it here, but specifically with Tiktaq'to, maybe want to replace this one, the Chameleon Skinks here, with flyers, and the Croxigors with the Ripidactyls, and the same composition works really well, especially for them, especially because the salamanders would get, you know, extra damage from the fire weaknesses, and they will still have the 11 skill points required, you know. Or you can go into just some Saurus units if you wish, some Dreadsaurians and Carnosaurs for the anti-large, that sort of idea. Now in terms of the skink, nothing wrong with really having some skink based armies, so they may yet surprise you, especially against under specific lords, such as, you know, the skink lords. They can choose between one or another, and of course depending on what they choose, of course I would go maybe with this, you know, for less, you know, Terran riders cost, and of course much better stats for them, especially the charge bonus. Of course it's always nice, and more recruit rank, it's always nice. So definitely some sort of compositions here would go, and notice they're always very good in terms of red line skills, and these can be quite good sweeper armies, like I like to say. It's always nice. And then finally, just some unit compositions based on the Swords Warriors, if you prefer to go with that, or just combinations of different missile troops or different cavalry troops as well. Note how effective all of them are in terms of red line skills. So, and remember that of course Pterodons outside of Tiktaq'to still get that drop ability, so which is always nice, of course. And always try to get some Quotals. Maybe this idea here is actually just the Horned ones and the Carnosaurs being under the Quotals, and for a nasty surprise, you know, that sort of a thought process is really cool. You can come up with tons of different army compositions. These are really just the tip of the iceberg, really. But always enjoy doing different army compositions. It's the best part, actually, for me, for the late game. So, in terms of final notes, Tic-Tac-Toe has a great starting position. It's very unique, rather unique, you know. You do still have the sea, but you have to fight against undead and other greenskins here initially. Then you have to go against Kairos, which is always nice. You know, it's interesting. It's a good addition that he focuses on units that typically you may not field, the flying units, so it's nice. It's quite micro-intensive, so it's not for the weak-hearted. So, the enemies that you'll face, they're quite varied compared to other starts, you know. It's a good change from other Lizardmen. The fact that your flying units require only tier 3 is excellent, and it will allow easier military provinces due to the buildings, which is always a problem for the lizards. Yeah. The main issue is how it kind of lacks some better mechanics. I wish he would have something to make him truly interesting. For different mechanics, all that he has for it is that he's actually buffing up, you know, flying units to the best. But still, it's just that. You may grow tired. It's up to you. I don't, but I know that others will disagree. But still, it could have some different mechanics for sure. Now, your army consists mainly of good infantry, good skirmishers, good cavalry and flyers, great under Tic-Tac-Toe, of course, good monstrous infantry, great and really a vast array of single entities. They do lack typical artillery, and they lack some range overall. Now, replenishment is average, mostly because of the climate. Still, I believe now that it's time for you to take to the skies and dominate them in full with Tic-Tac-Toe.